Well, look at this. Here we are again. Greetings and welcome to StarSpace46 Chats, our Sunday weekly sit down where I get to give you info for all the entrepreneurial movers and shakers that are here in Oklahoma, the state, not just the city. This series is really meant to highlight amazing people around this area and this community and the sorts of things they do. I'm your host, as always, Jeff Yenzer, the board secretary here at StarSpace46, which is a local co-working space positioned at the corner of Sheridan and Klein Avenues in downtown OKC. And we've been in business down here since 2016. So if you haven't noticed us, maybe you'll look. Please go ahead, as always, slam that like button, share with people that you love, or maybe those that you hate. I don't know. I mean, if you have to look at this face, whichever. And drop a comment. If you could also ring that little bell, and that way you'll know when these new episodes go live, and you'll be able to see immediately when those things hit, so you don't have to go looking for us. It really helps get the word out, and as everyone's coming out of a pandemic and looking toward hybrid workspace environments, maybe they become members one day, all because of you. So without further ado, I want to welcome our guest at this time, James Cooper. James, how's it going?
It's going. How are you?
I'm doing okay. There you go.
That upspeak thing you did there at the end.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Question mark?
Pretty much. James, for those of us that might not know who you are or what you do, kind of give everyone a quick little synopsis. I know that I know who you are, but maybe somebody else doesn't.
Does anyone really know who they are? I ask.
Next question.
So thanks for inviting me. I have the honor of representing Ward 2 on City Council here in Oklahoma City. Our boundaries, for those of you who don't know, our southern boundary is Northwest 23rd Street. Mm-hmm. And then to our east, our eastern boundary is essentially I-235. Mm-hmm. And then to the west, it kind of alternates between 23rd, their Meridian. So Meridian's the border for a while, mm-hmm. Then Tulsa Avenue, and then finally it's May Avenue until you get to the northern border of Ward 2, which is Northwest 122nd. Right. My guess, though, is most people know Ward 2 by its places, right? So Uptown 23rd, mm-hmm. Paseo, which is my neighborhood, the Asian District, Northwest 39th Street LGBT District, Yenzer District, Old Downtown Britain, parts of Lake Hefner, Penn Square Mall, Belle Isle Library. So I think there are things that they're kind of institutions in Ward 2 that I think make it, in my opinion, the best part of the city. But
I mean, I don't even live there, and I agree with you.
I'm a huge fan. It is, when I say it's an honor, I mean like it's an honor to represent Ward 2.
Well, I mean, you now sit on the city council, so kind of tell people what got you to that point, because I mean, civil service is such a huge jump for so many people, and many people have no idea kind of where to go and how to start really helping out their own communities. So I'd love to hear some more about that.
Yeah, so I think there are kind of two major catalysts. The first one is a long time ago. A little over 20 years ago, I was at Choctaw High School growing up in Midwest City, and the Columbine shootings happened. Mm-hmm. And I just remember politicians of both stripes knowing the culprit. The media knew the culprit, and it was, Tupac and Biggie and The Matrix and gangster rap and grunge and Doom, the video game.
Uh-huh.
And I was just like, I don't think those are the correct answers. Because I'd grown up on all of that, literally since I was 5. I had been watching horror movies and mm-hmm. all of it. And had not been in a fight, still have not been in a fight. So a lot of my undergrad was at OU in film studies and political science, really trying to suss out what the root causes of real life crime and real life violence are. And so a lot of my focus was on media violence. I took the bait. I was like, okay, what are the consequences of these images on our brains? And if it's not what they're saying in the media and in the halls of legislative power, then what is it? And the plan had always been to do an academic book on media violence, maybe a chapter on horror, a chapter on video games and television. You also have to remember, when I say television, I'm talking 20 years ago, before I could not have guessed what would happen with television.
Right.
I just could not have guessed. Though I was worried when all the reality television stuff started in 2000, 2001. I was like, I don't know, America, I don't think this is going to end well for us. But different conversation for a different day.
Sure.
So yeah, that had been the plan. And then I realized, well, no one's really going to read an academic book unless NPR gives it a good review or something. So I was really worried I was, going to do all this research, and that the people who really needed to hear it are students, teachers, their families, people sometimes outside the halls of academia. Remember, 25-ish% of the country have a bachelor's. And I just think that this is not a 25% conversation. I think this is all of us. And so then the teacher walkout happened a few years after I'd finished graduate school. And I was teaching a middle school, doing college preparation. And, honestly, even though that wasn't me going to school, it was almost like I was finishing a PhD because what it did was, I was making $35,000, $36,000 with 2 master's degrees, my second one being in creative writing. This wasn't a lot of money, but it was really not a lot of money to first-year teachers who were starting at $31,000, many of them with children. How do you do that? And the answer was they couldn't. And so I saw it in 2015, 2016, 2017, 2018. And when I tell you I saw it, what I saw in terms of it was despair. You could just walk those hallways and you could see it on the teachers' faces. You could see it on the students' faces, the counselors' faces. And I was like, well, I know I'm doing this because I'm single with a cat, but I had no idea how. So then the walkout happened, and the legislators, too many of them, shall we say, outside of the urban core of parts of our state, just really were either openly antagonistic toward public education or rhetorically clever.
Good way to put it.
So 2 weeks worth of this went on, and I'm just screaming like, raise the capital gains tax, raise the gross production tax, put us at the same levels of what Wyoming and Texas are. Wyoming and Texas, not necessarily hotbeds of progressivism, and yet their gross production tax was much higher. It's like, there is revenue, y'all, but we have to get it. And shame on us for, during the boom years, not doing that. So I finally just got to a place in 2018 where I was just like, all this research I've done on the root causes of violence, what I had learned, and I like to quote Stanford economics research, so you probably have heard me say this before, Jeff, but I learned, and it was just a crystallization of all 20 years of this research, but it was like, for every year a kid spends in a better environment, teen pregnancy goes down, college chances go up, they earn more over their lifetime, they have more stable family environments. And then for the kiddos who don't grow up in those better environments, it's places associated with income inequality, segregation, crime, and a lack of social cohesion, so like a lack of a community. And I was like, well, that's it then. Like, the answer in the podcast said it was an On the Media episode that was talking about this research on poverty and America's poverty myths. And one of the things they just made very clear is that a student who grows up in around, I can't remember if it was San Jose precisely, I want to say that's true, but somewhere in the Bay Area particularly, has a much stronger chance of achieving middle-class American dream than someone, I can't remember where they cited, in Tennessee.
Sure.
And so zip code becomes destiny. And so I just decided that since the next MAPS project was coming, that 1 penny sales tax that the residents get to vote on about every 10 years to allocate toward projects, I just decided that I would run, go out and talk to voters, ask them what their concerns for their neighborhoods were, hopes for our city, take notes, and then make a case that that's what the next MAPS needed to address, that it needed to address the better environment. The better environment. So walkable neighborhoods with bike, street lights, crosswalks, better reliable transit, parks with recreation, youth centers that have mental health access, to say nothing about career skills, a support system essentially for when kids are home after school or at home on the weekends or home during these breaks, whether it's summer, winter, spring, fall. So that's why it's the most, thank you for listening to that journey, because it is a long and winding road that I never thought was going to end with public service, but this was the only way I could do it. And I would just conclude by saying, just today, a couple hours ago, I got to sit in a room and see for the first time a draft implementation plan of the 16 MAPS projects. And as I was sitting there, I was just like, these concepts, the concerns and the hopes that people shared with me, the research I've done all these years, now is staring me in the face as a, reality over the next 10 years of the city's life.
Right. And I mean, as someone that's been in Oklahoma City, much like yourself, I think back to even your ward in 1995, because I graduated from high school in 99, the same year as Columbine. That was up to that April, I was able to walk the halls anytime you wanted to go to the bathroom or anything that. And then it changed immediately, and we were locked into our schools. And that was my last little hoorah before graduating. So I remember walking, because I felt to be big and strong enough to be able to walk through 23rd Street and, just walk up and down it, and knowing that my friends wouldn't do it, knowing that, there was just this air of avoidance that people were having around so many of the areas that in the last 30 now years have come up so much. And it's been beautiful to watch, but also I think about it, and then the part of me that says, all right, well, that's taken 30. What can we do in 15? What can we do in 10? What can we do in 5? Because we've already got that momentum. So now it's, what can we do next? And I think, to your point of, what the next 10 years could look like.
Right.
I would love to hear a little bit more about, like the day-to-day now, now that all of this has become this culmination. You are the seated council person. You do have a seat at that table. So what's that like?
A lot of gray hairs is what it's like. Because already you're talking about $1 billion worth of investments. You just heard my background. Like, I didn't go to a private school, as a K through 12er. You heard my salary that I was making as a middle school teacher. So you put someone like me in charge of $1 billion, that's not usual. And so so I thought that was all the hard work. And then the pandemic hit, then this historic reckoning with the legal legacy of white supremacy became our reality last summer. And that's the grace. Because now what the pandemic, at least in my estimate, has done is it's revealed how fragile everything really already was. It reveals that, that moment for Columbine wasn't just, that wasn't a one-off. We had been doing that for decades. We've been scapegoating. Oh, it's metal music. It's satanic music. It's the gays. The gays are doing this. It's always a scapegoat. And, I'm 39 this year, and this has been hitting me really hard this year. Like, I'm 39, and that means I'm born in 82. The Reagan era begins in 80. And there went those tax cuts, and with them went access to mental health care. We closed facilities, some of them that needed to be, but we didn't have a backup plan.
Right.
And we unleashed a drug war on our cities rather than treating addiction as a disease, right? Incarcerated. Now Oklahoma's number 1, right, in incarceration. So that means 40 years solid of dismantling that support system for our residents. 40 years. So the pandemic, I think, laid bare those 40 years, the consequences of not doing those sort of investments in the public sector. I even talked about public health. So
right.
So it's been a lot of the last year because the state government, I'm not going to mince words about this. The state and federal government abdicated their responsibilities during that pandemic. They fell onto the shoulders of city councilors and mayors all across our country. And I'm not gonna lie, I feel it. I feel older. I feel weathered, and I'm processing a lot of. It's one thing to research it,
Right.
It's a whole other to live through it and to have the responsibility in front of you of literally having word choose their lives, their actual lives. It really shifted everything. So day to day, when you ask that sort of question, so I mean, it just sort of varies. Like the last year was a lot of like intense existential, like, do we do a mask ordinance? How do we support our small businesses in the ward? Many of them restaurants, coffee shops, bars, our venues. Yeah, there was a lot of, that was what day to day was. And then trying to just make sense of, well, will there be a vaccine? When will there be a vaccine? How do we distribute the vaccine? So really the last year has been something I never, never imagined. So now the day to day as a council person really is, like I said, just today we had a meeting. I think they're doing it with a series of council members, just kind of walking us through all 16 MAPS projects and what the next literal 10 years of implementing those will look like, and kind of, draft proposals of what that could look like. So that's part of the day. I would also say that every Tuesdays and Thursdays, I hold office hours that are council related from 10 a.m. till 3 p.m. So just like you and I are sitting during a meeting right now, or for this recording, that was something that, like, because I have these hours set aside specifically for city council, I'm able to do stuff like this, or I'm able to meet with a resident or a nonprofit or city staff. And I really wanted to be intentional about that. It's something I borrowed from my time as a middle school teacher and an adjunct professor, was this idea of like office hours, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, Tuesdays and Thursdays are just a mixture of, I mean, it's almost like a stream of consciousness where one moment I'm talking to someone about housing and displacement. The next moment I'm talking with someone like you. In a couple hours, Councilwoman Hammond and I are going to be sitting with our city lawyers, sitting with the League of Women Voters to discuss what the redistricting process looks like later this fall for the wards. So, I mean, when I tell you it's a range, it's all over. And then, yeah, I'll leave it at that.
So what's on the horizon? Like what's coming, in the next few weeks, few months? Like what's happening with you?
Well, first things first is I'm off from teaching right now. I've left the middle school classroom, teaching at Oklahoma City University, philosophy, occasionally film studies and English at UCO, University of Central Oklahoma in Edmond. So next month we'll be kind of returning back to that schedule. I usually teach a class after all those Tuesday, Thursday meetings. I'll teach a class in the evening at OCU, and then Monday, Wednesday, depending, maybe a Friday, I'll do the UCO stuff. So be returning to that next month, and then also looking at, I think the most important priority in front of everybody, in my opinion right now, is, and I don't think the recording will actually come out, it'll come out just after that, but people need to keep paying attention. So that is, I authored a resolution that had 6 different community policing proposals. This is a result of what I mentioned earlier, the kind of historic reckoning with the legal legacy of white supremacy. And so last summer, after the protests we had in the city, and after like epic 9-7 hour long city council meetings, I sat with Councilwoman Hammond, Councilwoman Nice, my friend Corey Lynn Hall, who used to work at Homeless Alliance, and one of my favorite regulars here at Clarity Coffee, where I am right now. She recommended this community policing document, and I spent about a week digging through it. And so from that came 6 proposals that also included hiring a consultant with a background in kind of policing matters, And that resolution passed unanimously last summer. And I really want your viewers to hear this, because what I'm learning is that government is an ocean liner. I've heard Barack Obama say that in an interview with Mark Maron a few years ago. Government can be an ocean liner, and it takes time. So think of this timeline. Last June during the budget meetings was when I proposed these items. We passed that resolution unanimously, to my incredible surprise. Council is nonpartisan, I need everybody to know. But in all honesty, you know, some of us are more center left. Correct. Some of us are more center. Some of us are more center right. Some of us are more to the right, and some of us are more to the left. And it just is what it is. So there's probably about 3 of us who are that kind of center left spectrum, and then about 5 of us who are more center right spectrum. And then our mayor occupies this very interesting space right now. I'll let you talk to him about how he would define himself. I'd put him somewhere in that center right. I mean, he was a literal he served as a Republican in our state Senate, so I don't think that's me saying anything different, but he's a unique Republican. He's very unique in some ways that I find worthwhile.
Yes, he will be a guest later this fall. So, yes.
So there you go.
Yeah.
So that's kind of a 6-3 council. So it takes time and it's about building relationships with each other to try and pass the things. And we passed that unanimously. We passed it unanimously. And now in front of us, I'm going to give you some concrete examples. There was a 12-member working group from that resolution, the consultant. By July 31st, those residents and that consultant have to finish studying all 6 of those items and present to council in about September. And this is where your viewers can really be ready to follow along. Start really following along late August and September, because those recommendations about the shape of those 6 items will be right there in front of council. Okay. Already, the city manager set aside $1.3 million, again, $1.3 million, to begin to fund some of these things. So let me talk about one of them. One of them is we don't know the money allocation for all of them, but one of them is a $300,000 initial investment in an alternative response to mental health calls. Okay. So it would require the retraining of a dispatcher to better understand when we are receiving a 911 call that is a mental health crisis. And rather than sending out, well, I mean, there's a couple options. You would have a co-responder model where an ununiformed officer, still armed, goes out with a trained mental health professional. They respond, and the mental health professional kind of takes the lead. Right. So that's a co-responder model, it's called. The other response is where it's just what the city of Denver is doing with their STAR program, where it's just trained mental health professionals, no law enforcement. That's my preference. But I think either one of those are steps in a better direction than where we are right now, which is right now we're number 2, as I'm sure you know, in terms of police involved killings of their residents after an interaction with them. I'm just not okay with those numbers. And I know some people are like, well, but were they armed and what were they doing? And I think the question should always be, how did we get to a place where that resident felt violence was the way to interact with a loved one, a neighbor, random person? How did we get there? It's got to be the first question. And then number 2, the question has to be, how did we get there where an officer feels that taking someone's life is the literal only response left? That those 2 should be the questions, not, well, were they this? Did they deserve that? It's like, root causes, everybody. Get to root causes. Otherwise, we'll keep seeing the cycle continue. Correct. So anyway, the city manager set aside $300,000 to fund whatever recommendation comes before council as it becomes this fall. There are some other proposals there that I think are very interesting that I would mention, like making sure all officers are crisis intervention trained. I tell everyone, keep an eye on that in September or this fall generally. After this video comes out, keep following me on Instagram at James for OKC, and I'll be updating as I know more. And when that time comes and you see those proposals and you agree with them, reach out to your counselors, not just me. reach out to them and tell them that co-responder model, I like that, do it. Or I do not want a co-responder model. I want go bigger.
Sure.
So, I mean, there's going to be opportunities for people, critical opportunities this fall for people to add their voice to their respective council person. Because remember, it takes 5 of us to pass a thing. And all of these will come to council as recommendations to figure out how do we allocate that other million of the 1.3. And so, people's voices are going to be important. And I think that's also an important thing to say, because I know it might seem like the protester over last summer, that was a big thing, big media event. And it might feel like, oh, we didn't do anything. It's done. The city just passed the biggest police budget in its history. That last part is especially true, but also was $1.3 million separate from the police budget, separate from it, that can start funding this new way of thinking of our approaches to public safety. So that's only possible because people marched last year, and it's only possible because people called the city council and emailed the city council. Movement requires protest, freedom of assembly. It requires that freedom of expression, the email, the call, the talking to your counselor, to your mayor, posting. All of these things were necessary. And then there's that legislative part, but it's an ocean liner sometimes. The only other concluding remark I would make on just that note is, while it feels like an ocean liner, and in some ways it is, I've been told by my council staff in Ward 2, he's never seen an issue like this move as quickly as this one has, which is hard for me to hear because I'm a progressive and I want things much more quickly. Sure. But he's like, there has not been an issue like this that has gotten this much traction and this much movement. So keep in touch, everybody, keep engaged. It's the only way.
Right. And much like an ocean liner, when you get that much weight and momentum pushing towards something, it takes a very, very large opposition to ever stop it from moving. So that ocean liner is moving. It's going forward. It's chugging along. It's just making sure that it keeps on going. And, I always ask, what can our community do for you? But that answers it, and just be involved. Get involved. Be active.
People, I would say there's a couple things on that. Stay involved, keep engaged, follow the social media. A bit of a caution that I have for everybody is posting on social media ain't going to solve a lot. It really is voting. It really is attending council meetings. It really is making your voice heard to those council members. And the other thing that I grapple with is when we talk about the legal legacy of white supremacy, we need to really understand that we are talking about 1619 through 1865 for slavery. Juneteenth, we know, means it went a little bit longer. Then you're talking about Jim Crow segregation. I could not sit where I'm sitting right now on Main Street. That will continue from 1865 until, 1965. So that means, if you've done the math, and I have, that means that if I'm born in 82, that means that at best, it is the 1970s before the city of OKC and a lot of our fellow sister, brother, however cities identify. I don't mean to gender them actually. But the reason why I thought about that is sometimes people say sister cities, but cities are cities. But that means that we're only now in that moment, that reckoning, truly. And that's a scary thing. So that means there's a lot of responsibility on us. I say all this to say, I know some people might feel frustrated because the revolution isn't immediate and it doesn't just happen. And we haven't just resolved all of the remnants of that legacy. I have to tell everybody that legacy has been with us for so long. It even precedes slavery. If you think about the feudal era, as a half-Black queer person, the first queer person to serve on city council, I think about in the 1200s and 1300s during the Crusades, the state executing, prosecuting queer folk. So this long legacy of the state using whatever it can at its disposal to subjugate, repress, and oppress people it can't be fixed in 2 terms of, or 2 years of me serving, 2 terms of me serving.
Right.
And so I think what I would say to people who believe in justice and equity and restoration, restorative justice, that we really need to start thinking the long game here. We need to think about this as if it's a game of chess, not a game of performative. Well, I need to make sure someone sees me say this on social media, or else they're going to doubt my progressive credentials. Let them. They'll know you by your deeds, is what I'd like to say. They'll know you by your deeds. So vote, get engaged in any way you can, and remember, it is an ongoing process. It doesn't end when we vote every other presidential election. There's midterms or city council.
Yes.
There's this right now, following what happens after those recommendations come to us. And that's why I'm graying, because it turns out it's all a lot of work.
Even if you sign up, I always tell people, because I'm also a notary, even if you sign up for absentee ballots, the number of elections that happen that you rarely ever, the common member of our city or society just does not understand about the frequency of these sorts of elections and how often you can get to this ballot box. It's not once every 2 years. It is a continual process. And it's only through that. I'm out in Yukon myself, and there are times where it's so disheartening, because there will be a vote and they will compile all the votes in Yukon, and it is under 1,000 people, sometimes under 500. And I just think about the fact that I am 1 in 500. You start looking at, just the statistical number. Of course you have a voice. Get out there.
That's really important. And I think that's why I offer that sort of like longer term thing, because I just started noticing that sometimes during the last year, there were moments where I heard them, they felt voiceless. And I just really thought of our own city. And I'll be clear, I do not think $1.3 million even begins to really get at what we need. I would just remind everybody, Denver's mental health alternative began with $200,000. It is now at 1.4 million. So if we're beginning with 300,000, then we also know the fight ahead of us is that each subsequent budget, right? Until we get there. And that's more of that engagement. No, people must never forget their voice. They marched, they wrote, they called. All of those things made that 1.3 that did not exist at all exist. That's what did it. That's what did it. So no, I will never let people feel voiceless. I think another thing that I'm very excited about, that I think kind of summarizes a lot of what's coming and how my own bio dovetails with that is, this, in 2 years, this fall, the city will receive its first bus rapid transit system.
Correct.
Every 15 minutes from a covered bus shelter, similar to the streetcar stations. A bus rapid transit will arrive every 15 minutes like clockwork. That 15-minute frequency, we call it, the frequency with which a transit vehicle arrives, 15 minutes or less is when you now know you have a reliable transit system. Until you get there. So I'm very excited about this. This is going to go around the transit center downtown, First National, come up Hudson on the north, along Elemental, through Midtown, take 10th Street to the west, and then just head down the old streetcar route that is Classen Boulevard. And it'll go all the way through, connecting you right there where Plaza is, where Uptown is at 23rd and Classen, Asian District, Memorial Park and the Boys and Girls Club. Then you get to Northwest Expressway in Classen, turn west, Penn Square Mall, Dave & Buster's, Target, Best Buy, Integris, the grocery store that's there right now. And it will go all the way to Meridian. And a park and ride will be there. You can go to Lake Hefner because it's right there. Or if you lived further out, you could bring your car in and park at 23rd and Meridian. Use the BRT to get to work anywhere along that corridor, like Northwest Expressway, anywhere along that Classen corridor, or to move around Midtown, Bricktown, and downtown. And now that streetcar is going to make more sense, because now I can use that streetcar once I've got downtown to move around any of these different options. Max 4, we said let's do 2 more. One to the northeast side and one to the south side.
Mm-hmm.
So by the time this next decade is done with us, we should have in the urban core a reliable transit system with 15-minute frequency or less. This is critical because that better environment I described earlier, we don't have to look to the coast for it. The developer of the Paseo 100 years ago, when it was Spanish Village, and where I live, where Ward 2 begins as the country, that was the country. Where Ward 2 begins was the country farm. And the only way he could convince people to move out there was, I'm going to give you walkable neighborhoods, well lit, and near you will be the basic needs of the individual. And if that part of town doesn't, there will be transit connecting you to the part of town that does. So that was the streetcar, the private streetcar that Anton Klassen and John Chartel had to get you back downtown. We are revisiting our past with the best practices we've learned over the last 100 years, like prioritizing ADA, for instance, or whatever it might be. So no, I think the next 10 years, but starting with what's coming with the alternative mental health calls, whatever other recommendations come, the BRT in 2 years, the implementation year by year by year, starting at the end of 2022 with maps. The next 10 years of our lives are going to transform not just the urban core, but importantly the urban core. And I think a lot of the city, and it'll set us up for the next generation who finds themselves shaped by whatever thing happened at Choctaw High School.
Exactly. Well, James, it has been an absolute pleasure. And you're my age, so you probably heard this 1,000 times, but it's been one hell of a time hanging with Mr. Cooper. I'll tell you that right now. I hope you all the best, and you always know that here at StarSpace46, we are ready. We are all voters. It's one of the reasons I became a notary, was so that we could make sure that any absentee ballots or anything like that, it can be taken care of here. So we are ready, and we are wanting to see Oklahoma City change exactly as we were talking about in the next 10 and 20 and 30 and 40 years, and it all starts today.
Well, I'm very appreciative of your kind words. I'm also very appreciative of you all being in our city and doing this work that you're doing, because you all are, speaking of giving voice, you're giving voice to people who have a dream, an idea, a concept, and you're helping to build, well, I'm telling you stuff you already know, but you're helping them build a community and strengthen themselves, confidence in themselves. So I'm really glad to see you all doing the work you're doing.
Yeah, it all can start with small business, and that's, it grows. It's that rising tide. It's just throwing more water in the bay.
So everyone go look at the Maps 4 projects. You can just Google that.
Yep.
Google Better Streets, Safer Cities. You can see some of the other infrastructure plans coming. And once you look at those two documents, just take everything you're learning. Just take everything you all are learning together and start looking along transit routes. Start looking in these neighborhoods and just start thinking, like, how can I take what I've learned at StarSpace and how can I start a business along one of those routes? What does Southside need to look like? How can I be a part of Southside? Or East Side, the urban core, wherever. So no, the infrastructure is coming now. Dream big. Have fun.
Join the win-win-win.
Do good by our people.
Yes. All right, James. Have a wonderful day, and we will watch everything that you're doing, and we can't wait to see how far you fly, my friend.
Be flying in Ward 2. You won't have to look too far, but thank you so much.
Take care. And it was a long discussion, but one that I think truly needed to be talked about, because especially here in the Oklahoma City area, there's a lot of people that just don't understand. They think that, well, it's their ward that isn't the one that's holding up shape, but it's all of us together, and it's moving forward as a city, and every single one of the suburbs, and then looking toward the state on a whole. So change has to happen, and it comes from each and every one of us. Thank you again for joining us at StarSpace Chats. Please share this with your friends. Join our community as a full-time or part-time member by visiting StarSpace46.com. You can also schedule a tour of the facility, book a meeting space, or maybe even find that next great office space for you to kind of grow your company and work in a hybrid environment. We have free co-working Wednesdays, so come on by. And if you'd like to buy any of our custom merch, you can always find it at merch46.com. I'll always thank Rodney with Quality Content Strategies, who serves as our producer for these episodes. And I've been your host, Yenzer, Jeff Yenzer, from Yenzer Consulting Services and StarSpace46. I'll see you next time. And until then, be safe wherever life takes you. Thanks, everybody.